It happened in an instant. One moment I was driving, caught in the familiar rhythm of everyday life, busy, distracted, caught up in 1,000 small thoughts. The next moment, everything shattered. The crash was violent, the screech of metal against asphalt deafening. Time seemed to stretch, and as my car flipped, I felt myself detach from my body, as though I were simply a passenger in a vessel that no longer belonged to me. I remember floating above the wreckage, unable to comprehend what was happening. I could see myself, lifeless, slumped in the seat, yet there was no fear, no panic. I felt strangely at peace, as though I were being carried away by something far greater than my own understanding. I wanted to look down, to mourn the body I had once inhabited, but a soft, soothing voice filled the space around me, pulling my attention upwards. "Do not be afraid," the voice said, gentle but full of authority. There was a depth to it that resonated within me, as if I had heard it before, somewhere deep within my soul. A light began to shine in front of me, not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming. As I moved toward it, I felt a sense of peace that I had never experienced in life. The worries, fears, and frustrations that had once weighed me down seemed to dissolve in the presence of this light, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm and clarity. When I reached the light, I saw him, the figure who had spoken. He stood before me, radiating warmth and love, his face kind and serene. I knew instinctively that he was someone I could trust, someone who had seen all of human history, who understood every pain, every joy, every choice I had ever made. He knew me. "Welcome," he said with a tenderness that softened the edges of my heart. "I have brought you here to see, to understand." I felt an odd mix of gratitude and confusion. How had I arrived here? Why was I chosen? Was this truly the end, or had something greater begun? He gestured to the space around us, and I saw a vast, endless landscape stretching out before me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a realm of profound stillness and purity, untouched by the chaos of the world I had left behind. Yet, within this peaceful expanse, I sensed a heaviness, an unspoken tension in the air. "What do you see?" he asked, his voice a soft echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I looked again. It wasn't just the vast emptiness that caught my attention, it was the shadows, dark, swirling clouds that seemed to move with a mind of their own. In the distance, I saw shapes moving within the darkness, struggling, lost, but also oddly familiar. These were people, I realized. Souls who had once walked the earth but were now trapped in this void. "They are lost," I whispered, a deep ache forming in my chest. "What happened to them?" The divine figure's gaze was compassionate but filled with sorrow. "They chose to ignore the path that leads to light. They sought fulfillment in things that could not satisfy their deepest needs. Their choices led them here, to a place where they can no longer find peace, no longer find their way back." My heart ached as I looked at the lost souls. I could feel their confusion, their regret, their longing for something they couldn't name. It was as if they had wandered too far, convinced that there was nothing else to seek but the world's fleeting promises. They had placed their trust in the wrong things. "Will they ever find their way?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure paused, as if weighing the answer carefully. "That depends on their choices," he said, his tone soft yet filled with an undeniable certainty. "Many will remain here, trapped in their own fears, their own desires. They will choose to stay in the darkness because they no longer believe there's light. But some, even now, are beginning to see. The light always finds a way, even in the darkest places." I felt a deep sense of sadness, mixed with hope. It was true that some of the souls would never find their way back, but there was still a chance for others. There was still a chance for change, for transformation. But I couldn't help but wonder, what would it take for them to see the light? And could I do anything to help? The divine figure seemed to read my thoughts, for he spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. "There is a path for all who seek it. But it is not easy. The world will continue to pull people away from the light. There will be many temptations, distractions, false promises that seem too good to ignore." I felt a chill run through me at the mention of distractions. "What do you mean? What false promises?" He looked at me with understanding, as though he knew the questions that were already forming in my heart. The world will offer many things in the coming days. Technology, convenience, security, things that seem harmless, even beneficial. But these things will not bring true peace. They will only deepen the divide between souls and the light. One of the greatest deceptions will be the mark. People will be offered an illusion of safety, an illusion of belonging, but in truth, it will separate them from what truly matters. I shuddered as I tried to grasp the weight of his words. The mark of the beast, something I had heard of in passing, a vague idea tied to apocalyptic predictions. But the way he spoke of it made my heart race. It wasn't just a symbol or a passing trend. It was a spiritual trap, a snare designed to sever humanity's connection to the divine. What can we do? I asked, feeling small in the face of such a vast, unfathomable force. The figure smiled gently, his eyes filled with both compassion and strength. You must be prepared. Not just for the world around you, but for the world within you. Strengthen your faith. Build community. Seek truth, and do not be swayed by the promises of convenience. Your true security, your true peace, lies not in what the world offers, but in the light within you. I felt a deep sense of clarity wash over me as the divine figure spoke those words. In that moment, I understood. It wasn't the world that had to change first, it was me. My heart, my spirit, my choices. Only by preparing myself spiritually could I hope to help others find their way. I couldn't control the forces that were at work in the world, but I could choose to live in the light. The divine figure gave me a final, lingering look, as if to seal the understanding he had shared. Go back now, he said softly. Return to the world you knew, but with a new vision, a new purpose. The path ahead will not be easy, but it will be worth it. Help others see the light. Help them understand that they too can find their way home. And with that, I felt myself pulled back to the broken body I had left behind. But this time, I was different. I was no longer just a lost soul. I had a mission, a purpose, and a renewed sense of the light that could guide me through even the darkest of times. As I was slowly brought back to the world I once knew, the divine figure stood beside me, unwavering and calm. The serene light around us seemed to fade, but I felt its presence within me, more real now than ever before. I was no longer the same person who had first encountered that light. Something within me had shifted. And yet, the questions still lingered, hanging in the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. I had seen the lost souls, but what was my role in all of this? What was I supposed to do with the understanding I had gained? The weight of the knowledge I had received pressed against me, but the divine figure sensed my struggle and spoke, as though reading my mind. Do you wonder why I have shown you these things? The voice asked, and though it was as soft as before, there was now a deep sense of purpose behind it. I nodded, my heart still in turmoil. Yes! What should I do with all of this? How do I help those who are lost? The figure's gaze softened, filled with compassion. You must understand that the path ahead is not one of immediate action, but of gradual transformation. It will take time. But you must see clearly, for in the clarity of your vision, you will help others find their way. He extended his hand, and as he did, the landscape before us shifted once again. The vast, open space that had once seemed peaceful now transformed into a different world, one filled with strange, gleaming structures and unfamiliar landscapes. The air felt heavy with the hum of technology, as if every corner of the world was being shaped by a force I could not yet comprehend. The divine figure spoke again, his voice now tinged with sorrow. This is the future that awaits you, a future where the world will be governed by systems that seem to offer convenience and safety. At first, the changes will be small, almost imperceptible. A new device here, a new service there, just a few steps, one after another. But these small steps will lead to a world that is no longer as it once was. I watched as images of this future unfolded before my eyes. There were people standing in long lines, receiving implants, each person wearing a small, discreet mark on their forehead or hand. Some looked content, even relieved, while others appeared uneasy, unsure of what they were doing. Yet, there was no turning back. The mark was a symbol of compliance, a symbol that promised convenience, quick access to resources, guaranteed safety, the certainty of being part of a greater whole. The promises were tempting, even seductive. I felt my chest tighten, an overwhelming sense of foreboding creeping up on me. "What is this mark?" I asked. "Why do they accept it so easily?" The figure's face grew somber as he answered, "It is the mark of the beast, the final snare that will deceive many. It will begin as something benign, something that offers security and control over chaos. But over time, it will become more than just a mark. It will become a seal, a choice that will bind a person's soul to the world's systems, severing their connection to the divine." I watched the people in the visions, their expressions gradually changing from relief to something darker. They became increasingly robotic in their movements, their faces vacant, as if their spirits were no longer their own. I saw families torn apart, communities fractured, all for the sake of maintaining the illusion of safety. The more people accepted the mark, the more isolated they became from one another, from their faith, and from any semblance of true human connection. "But they don't know what they're giving up," I whispered, my heart aching at the sight of it. The divine figure nodded, his expression heavy. "No, they do not. They believe that they are gaining something, a better life, a future of certainty. The world will promise them everything they have ever desired: wealth, health, and ease. The lies will be subtle, wrapped in layers of convenience, so that they will not recognize the spiritual cost of what they are doing until it is too late." I shuddered at the thought. How could people be so easily deceived? How could they give up their very souls for a false sense of security? "The subtlety of this deception will be its greatest power," the figure continued, his voice unwavering. "The people will not see the spiritual consequences of their choices until they have already made them. And by then, the mark will have taken hold, first in their minds, and then in their hearts." I felt a deep sense of grief as I watched the visions unfold further. People who had once been vibrant, alive with passion and purpose, became hollow shells of their former selves. Their eyes were blank, their expressions numb. The light within them dimmed as they became more and more dependent on the technological systems they had once embraced. The mark was not just a physical symbol, but a spiritual one, an anchor that tied them to the world's false promises, and in doing so, severed their connection to the divine. "But what of those who refuse the mark?" I asked, my voice shaking with the weight of the question. The divine figure turned his gaze toward me, his eyes filled with compassion. "There will be a cost, yes. Refusing the mark will not be easy. It will mean hardship, persecution, and a struggle unlike anything the world has known. But those who remain faithful will find refuge in me. They will find strength in the light, even in the darkest days. Though the world may turn against them, they will not be forsaken." I felt a sense of peace wash over me at his words. Though the path would be difficult, there was hope, a hope rooted not in the world's promises, but in the divine presence that would never abandon those who chose the light. "The choice will be clear," he continued, "but the world will not make it easy. People will be tempted, swayed by the promise of safety, convenience, and comfort. But in the end, they must choose what is eternal over what is temporary. They must choose the truth that leads to life, not the illusion that leads to destruction." I took in a deep breath, the weight of the knowledge pressing against me. The choice seemed so clear in that moment, but I knew that for many, it would not be. The false promises of security, of a better future, would blind them to the truth. And once they accepted the mark, it would be too late to turn back. "But what can I do?" I asked, the question burning in my mind. How can I help them see the truth? The divine figure's expression softened, his voice filled with a gentle wisdom. "You must start by seeing the truth yourself. Strengthen your faith, build a community of those who will stand firm in their beliefs, and prepare spiritually for the challenges ahead. It will not be easy, but it will be worth it. Share what you have learned, help others to see what you now see, and trust that, in the end, the light will always shine through the darkness." The visions began to fade, and the world around me slowly returned to the present. But the clarity I had gained, the understanding of the deception that awaited humanity, remained with me, etched into my soul. The path ahead would be difficult, yes, but now I knew that there was something far greater than the false promises of the world. There was a truth, a light, that could not be extinguished. And it was that truth I would carry forward, no matter the cost. As the divine figure's presence enveloped me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of a deeper revelation. The light, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a sharp contrast to the growing darkness I was beginning to understand. The figure's voice, ever steady and loving, continued to guide me as the visions unfolded further. "The mark will not come as a sudden force," he explained, his voice filled with sorrow. "It will be a slow burn, creeping into the world under the guise of convenience, security, and progress. And many will fall for it, believing that it is a gift, a blessing even." I shuddered, feeling a pit form in my stomach. But why? Why would they accept it so easily? Don't they see what it's doing? The figure's gaze softened with an understanding that transcended my limited comprehension. People will not recognize it as a threat right away. At first, the mark will be disguised as something harmless. A new technology, a system of convenience. It will start with small things like buying groceries faster, gaining access to exclusive benefits, or receiving protection from a chaotic world. I watched the vision unfold before me. At first, it seemed innocuous. People lined up at stores, some in cities, others in quiet towns. They held their hands or foreheads to scanners, and in return, they were awarded with immediate access to whatever they desired. They smiled, content in their newfound ease. It was as though they had finally achieved the perfect solution to their problems. And then, the shift occurred. I could see it, subtle but insidious, an unseen tether tightening. What seemed like a simple gesture, a harmless action, began to subtly change the faces of those who participated. At first, no one noticed. They were too focused on the convenience, on the speed of transactions, on the promise of an ideal life. The future had promised them everything: comfort, ease, control. And they thought they were in control. The divine figure continued, his tone soft, as if burdened with the weight of knowing what lay ahead. "The mark will offer an illusion of freedom. But true freedom is not found in convenience. It is found in the heart that chooses to seek truth, even when the world grows more difficult." I watched as the society around these people became more regimented, more controlled. What started as a promise to make their lives better soon spiraled into a system that demanded more and more of them. Their hands were no longer free. They had become tethered to an invisible network that dictated not only their actions, but their thoughts. Each decision, each moment, became a calculation within the confines of the mark's influence. How do they not see it? How can they not see they're giving away everything? I asked, my voice trembling. The divine figure's gaze pierced through me, filled with a deep sadness. "Because, my child, they do not realize that they are trading their souls for temporary comfort. The world will convince them that they are in control, that they are merely improving their lives. But what they do not know is that every choice made under the mark will slowly chip away at their connection to the divine, until their hearts are so filled with the world that they can no longer hear the voice of truth." I was overwhelmed, the enormity of the situation beginning to settle in my chest like a heavy weight. So, they're being deceived? Yes. The mark will not appear as a villain, but as a savior. People will be promised protection from the chaos of the world, from poverty, from sickness. In the face of uncertainty, they will crave safety and security. And the mark will offer it, but only in exchange for their freedom, their very souls. The figure's words echoed in my mind, and as I continued to watch the vision unfold, I saw the increasing cost of the mark's promises. The technology advanced, offering people more luxuries and conveniences. But with each step, the world grew colder. The bond between human beings weakened. Families became fractured as people prioritized their dependence on the system over their relationships with each other. What had once been a society built on love, community, and trust had morphed into one centered on individualism and isolation. The false promises of the mark were so alluring that no one questioned the price they were paying. The mark, the figure continued, will lead people to believe that they can have everything they want in this world, the perfect life, the perfect home, the perfect family. But those who accept it will be forced to forfeit the most important thing, their relationship with God. As I watched this tragic transformation unfold, I saw the toll it took on their faith. It wasn't as if people consciously abandoned their belief, but rather, their faith slowly eroded over time. With each passing day, they became more dependent on the system, more wrapped up in the convenience of their lives. The rituals of worship grew distant, replaced with mindless distractions and shallow pursuits. In their quest for control, they lost the very thing that had once given them life. The figure placed a hand over my heart, and I felt the warmth of his touch seep deep into my soul. Your faith will be tested in ways you cannot yet understand. You will see people you love turn toward the system, believing they have no other choice. You will witness the suffering of those who cannot see the truth. I felt a tightness in my throat, unable to fathom how I could stand by while those I loved made such choices. But the figure's words held a deep well of compassion. The test will not be easy, but it will be a test of your love. Love for the truth, love for your faith, and love for those who have been deceived. You must remember that, even in the darkest times, you are never alone. I watched the vision stretch into an endless web of decisions, people being pulled deeper and deeper into the system. The mark was no longer just a tool, it had become their identity. And with each passing moment, the cost of their choice became clearer, each one sealed further into a life of isolation, dependence, and spiritual death. The figure's voice grew stronger now, filled with conviction. But there is always hope. Even in the deepest darkness, the light of faith will remain. Those who stand firm, those who refuse the mark, will find strength in their beliefs. And while the world will tempt you to abandon the truth, you must stand firm. You must trust in the promise of salvation. As the vision faded and I stood once again in that sacred light, I felt a deep resolve fill my spirit. The mark, with all its promises, would be nothing but a trap that would ensnare the souls of the unwary. The deception was subtle, but its consequences were eternal. The choice would be clear, but not easy. And in the face of that challenge, I knew my faith would be the only thing that could guide me through. Though the path ahead would be fraught with difficulty, I now knew that I had a choice: to remain faithful, to trust in the divine, and to stand firm against the subtle forces that would seek to lead me astray. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Faith, true faith, would always be stronger than the promises of a world that was slowly but surely losing its way. The divine figure's presence around me felt like a gentle embrace, both comforting and firm. I stood still, grappling with the enormity of the knowledge I had just witnessed. The world, I now understood, was facing a crossroads that many were unaware of. The mark, the slow erosion of faith, and the deep deception woven into the fabric of society would create a future unlike anything we had ever known. And yet, amidst all this darkness, I felt a glimmer of light. "Now, my child," the divine figure spoke again, his voice steady and nurturing. "The time has come for you to prepare, not just for yourself, but for those who will need guidance when the world begins to crumble." I felt a weight in my chest. I had always considered myself a faithful person, but what I had seen, the slow acceptance of the mark, the growing reliance on technology, and the loss of community, had shaken me to my core. How could I, a mere individual, stand against something so vast, so ingrained in the world's way of life? "Do not fear," the figure reassured me, as though reading my thoughts. Preparation, in this time, involves more than just securing material needs. It begins with your heart, your spirit, and the relationships you cultivate. To endure what is coming, you must build your faith, strengthen your community, and prepare in practical ways. You are not meant to face this alone. A sudden sense of peace washed over me. The figure's words made sense. I wasn't expected to fight the coming storm on my own. The strength of faith, community, and practical preparation would be my foundation. "You must begin with your own spiritual growth," the figure continued. "As the world falls into confusion, the clarity you gain from a deep connection with the divine will be your guiding light. Without it, the false promises of the world will lead you astray." I nodded, understanding that the most important preparation was not something I could touch or gather, it was something internal. I needed to strengthen my relationship with God, to seek His wisdom daily, to open my heart to His guidance. It wasn't enough to simply know the truth. I had to live it, embody it. The figure gently raised his hand, and I saw a vision of a quiet, peaceful life, one where individuals, families, and communities gathered in prayer and reflection. It was simple but profound. These were people who had made their relationship with the divine their highest priority. They had no need for the conveniences the world offered. Instead, they found peace in their faith, in each other, and in the quiet moments shared together. The bond they had with God and each other was unshakable. True community will become more important than ever, the figure explained. In a world where so many will be deceived, those who remain faithful must come together. They must strengthen each other, lift each other up. No one can stand alone in the trials to come. The vision shifted, and I saw groups of people gathering in humble homes, small communities hidden from the larger society. They were not isolated, but connected by their shared faith, supporting one another as they prepared for the challenges ahead. These communities were self-sufficient, relying on each other not just for physical needs, but for spiritual encouragement and strength. There was a sense of unity, of purpose, that bound them together. "You must build such communities," the figure said, his voice filled with compassion. "There is power in numbers, yes, but the true power lies in the love and unity that come from shared faith. These communities will not just survive, they will thrive, for they will have the strength of the divine within them." I realized then that my role in this process was not passive. I had a responsibility to not only cultivate my own faith, but to help build such communities, places where people could find refuge, support, and truth. These would be sanctuaries in the midst of a world growing darker by the day. Then, there's the practical aspect, the figure continued, his voice taking on a more directive tone. "You must also prepare in practical ways. These communities will need to be self-sufficient, capable of providing for their own needs when the world outside becomes unstable. You must learn the skills that will sustain you: agriculture, carpentry, medicine. Your reliance on the world's systems will diminish, and you must learn to rely on your hands, on the resources God has given you." The vision before me shifted once again, showing people tending to gardens, growing their own food, learning to build shelter, and caring for one another in ways that the modern world had long forgotten. They were practical, wise, and deeply connected to the earth. Their preparation wasn't about stockpiling endless supplies, it was about knowing how to live in harmony with the resources around them, using what was available to create a sustainable and thriving life. The figure's presence softened. "Prepare, yes, but do not be consumed by fear. Your heart must remain anchored in faith. If you trust in the divine and in the strength of the communities you build, you will have what you need. And when others come to you, searching for answers, you will be ready to offer them the truth." I felt a sense of deep responsibility stir within me. This wasn't just about preparing for the future, it was about offering hope. In a world where so many would be lost, I could offer light. The lessons I was learning, the strength I was gaining, were not meant to be kept to myself. They were meant to be shared, passed on to others who would need guidance when the time came. "You must teach others what you have learned," the figure encouraged, his voice tender but firm. "Do not keep this knowledge to yourself. The more people you can help prepare, the greater the strength of the communities that will rise up to face the darkness. Share the truth of the coming trials, share the hope that can be found in faith, and help others see the value of spiritual and practical preparation." I nodded, understanding the magnitude of the responsibility that had been entrusted to me. This was not just a personal journey, it was one that involved the lives of many others. The future of faith, of truth, depended on the willingness to share and build together. "You are not alone in this," the figure reminded me. "Remember, where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there among them. You will not walk this path alone." With those words, I felt a renewed sense of purpose flood my heart. I would begin with my own faith, nurturing it with care. I would build my community, starting with the people around me, and together, we would learn to prepare in practical ways. And when others came searching, I would be ready to share the light, the love, and the wisdom that had been given to me. The future would be challenging, but I now knew that with spiritual growth, community, and practical preparedness, we could not only survive, it would be possible to thrive, even in the face of the storm that was coming. The divine figure's presence remained with me, gentle and powerful all at once. The visions had come, the lessons had been learned, And yet, something within me still felt incomplete. The weight of the world's future, with its impending trials and temptations, seemed almost too much to bear. But as I stood there, surrounded by the serene light that radiated from the divine, I sensed that something deeper was about to unfold. I felt his gaze upon me, filled with both compassion and understanding. You have seen much, and your heart has been burdened by the weight of what is to come. But know this, my child, his voice was calm, steady, as if he were soothing a restless soul. There is always hope, always a possibility for revival, no matter how dark the world becomes. I took a deep breath, letting the words settle within me. The truth of the situation was undeniable. The world would face trials unlike any it had known, and many would fall into despair. Yet, there was a sense of peace that was beginning to take root in my heart. Revival? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How can there be revival when everything seems to be falling apart? The figure smiled, and in that smile was a warmth that reached the very core of my being. Do you not understand? It is precisely in the darkest moments that the light can shine the brightest. It is when the world feels the most lost that the power of faith and love has the potential to lead it back to salvation. I closed my eyes, reflecting on the weight of his words. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was not without hope. Despite the deep deception that would sweep across the world, despite the growing pressures to conform to the world's ways, the possibility for revival remained. Faith could not be extinguished if it was tended with care and love. It could not be defeated by the forces that sought to divide and control. You must understand, the world is not beyond redemption, the divine figure continued, his voice filling the space with unwavering assurance. It will seem as though the forces of darkness have won. The promise of convenience, of security, will be so enticing that many will choose it over the hard path of faith. But even in the deepest darkness, there will always be those who choose light. There will always be those who choose truth over the lies of the world. A sense of calm filled my heart, and the tension that had lingered for so long began to dissolve. I had felt helpless at times, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was coming. But now, I realized that I was not without purpose. I had been shown the way. The path of faith, of community, of preparedness, and I had been given a message that was not just for me, but for all those I would encounter. You are one of those who will choose the light, the divine figure said softly. And in choosing that light, you will guide others. You will show them that there is always a way back to the heart of God, no matter how far they have strayed. I felt tears well up in my eyes. The weight of the world's troubles seemed unbearable at times, and yet, here was a message of unwavering hope. The light of faith, no matter how small it seemed, could never be extinguished. There was always a path forward, always a chance for revival, no matter how dark the circumstances. You will face great challenges, the figure continued, his voice now filled with a quiet strength, but you are not alone. And you must never forget this. The love of the divine is greater than anything that can come against you. It is eternal, unshakable. As long as you carry that love within you, you will always find your way through the darkness. His words settled deeply within me, and I felt the renewed sense of purpose growing stronger within my heart. The world's future was uncertain, yes, but there was a deep truth that had been revealed to me. Faith, love, and the pursuit of truth were the only things that could endure the coming trials. And I had a responsibility to help others see that, no matter how difficult or confusing the journey became. You must go back now, the divine figure said gently. Your time here has come to an end, but the lessons you have learned will stay with you. Share them, live them, and remember, there is always hope. And then, with a sense of peace that washed over me like a river of warmth, I felt myself being drawn back. The divine presence began to fade, and I found myself returning to the world I knew, the world of flesh and blood, where time continued its march forward, where the trials I had witnessed were yet to come. I awoke, gasping for breath, the harshness of the world around me greeting me like a sudden storm. But this time, I was different. I had seen what I had seen, and the truths that had been revealed to me burned brightly in my soul. The world might grow darker, and many might be led astray, but I knew now that the message of hope, of faith, of revival was real. It was something I could hold on to with all my strength. The mission was clear. I would live my life with the lessons I had learned, sharing them with those around me. I would build community, cultivate faith, and prepare not just for the physical challenges that were to come, but for the spiritual journey ahead. And I would hold fast to the truth that no matter how dark the world grew, there was always the possibility for revival, for salvation, and for a return to the light. As I stepped forward into the world once more, I carried that peace with me. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but with hope in my heart and faith as my guide, I was ready. Ready to walk the path and lead others through the darkness toward the light that would never go out. For even in the darkest of times, light would always find a way.